Hey, welcome to Moody Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be doing the Moody Book Tag. The Moody Book Tag was put together by Slanted Pages. I'll link their original in the description. I was trying to find a tag that I could do because I wanted to do a tag video. I didn't have very much planned, but I knew that I wanted to film. So I'm glad that I found her tag and her channel. So we can go ahead and get started. The first question is, do you consider yourself a mood reader? And I would say probably yes. I have said this before, but I love the idea of TBRs. I like the idea of having everything planned out and going in order. That's just never how it works out. I cannot make myself read something or do something unless I 100% want to in the moment, and it's kind of a problem. So I'm definitely more of a mood reader than I would like to be. That's just how it is. And that connects with question number 2, which is, do you set a TBR list and do you stick to them? I love creating TBR lists. I love having some kind of direction to go in, and something to fall back on, especially if I'm having a hard time making a decision, which happens a lot. But so far as like monthly TBRs go, I do not follow them to a T. I do have some topical TBRs, and since there's no like time limit, like there's not really a way to necessarily fall off unless I abandon it altogether, which I have not done. All of them are still interesting to me. The only books that I might not get to are ones that I no longer have access to, but that's different than me just deciding not to read them at all. Prompt number 3 is, do books affect you emotionally? Does the mood of a book rub off on you? I don't know how many times I've said before that a book made me cry. It's probably half the books that I read or more have made me at least tear up because I am a mess. I'm a Pisces crybaby, so all of the things make me cry. If it's happy, it makes me cry. If it's sad, it makes me cry. If it's cute, it makes me cry. So that's just how it is. Now, there's also the question of, does the mood of a book rub off on you? And this one's a little bit complicated because it's not like 100% of the time if a book is sad, it's going to make me sad. But they do impact me. Like I do get very emotionally impacted by books. Part of it's because of like the reflection, some of it's like feeling for the characters in different ways. I've got a couple of examples. There is some poetry that is definitely like got me. Basically every time I read poetry, that's like a different level of being able to feel the emotions that they lay out. Like when I read Sappho earlier in the year, it gave me so many feelings. So many feelings. And like I expected it to be good and interesting because it's a classic, but it's also really old, and I usually don't read stuff that's that old. I find it kind of a little bit hard to parse through, but this really hit me, really got me. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Gay yearning has not changed since the beginning of time, and this book is proof of that. I will say that one of the reasons why I was able to get into this book and to a lot of the poetry that I've read this year in the way that I have, is because I read How Poetry Can Change Your Heart by Andrea Gibson and Megan Fowley, and this really impacted kind of my perspective on certain things. I already kind of read poetry in a very like emotional way, like emotionally analytical, if that makes sense. But I think that this gave me a very specific perspective with which to read, if not winter, just because of the, I don't know, I got a lot more out of just the metaphor of most of her poetry being unfinished. So this gave me a lot of feelings, and I definitely felt like the yearning and different things like that. Another poetry book that really made me feel a lot of what was in it this year is Soft in the Middle by Shelby Eileen. I think I read that for the read-a-thon. It was like a Canadian read-a-thon. I'm so glad that I read this poetry collection. I had heard Cece from Problems of a Book Nerd talk about it a while back, so I'm glad that I finally got to it, because that, again, it was, again with the gay yearning, but it really had me in that mindset. The last book that I'll talk about for this question that doesn't even ask for book recommendations is Lording Keeps Breaking Up With Me, because this one also had me feeling a lot of ways. I really felt what the character was feeling, and a lot of that was because, well, I haven't been in her specific relationship dynamic. I definitely have been in the position where the relationship was unhealthy, and it was very hard to step away from. Honestly, this is one of those books that I wish that I had had as a teenager. In general, not just relationships, but like friendships. I know that there has been a lot of me not like acknowledging my worth and taking more crap than I deserve. So I really felt for Freddie's character in this book. And it also made me do a lot of reflecting on stuff in general. So this book definitely did impact my mood. Had like a mini like existential crisis a little bit, but like in a good way. I don't know. Those are some books that definitely like rubbed off on my mood in different ways. There are other ones that have rubbed off on my mood in other ways as well, but I've already spent way too much time on this question. So question number 4 is, when you're feeling sad, do you like to read sad books, happy books, or neutral books? This question really depends on my mood. And if I am just sad versus like depressed, and then like what type of depressed I'm feeling, because like, and that might sound weird, especially if you don't like deal with that, but there's some times where I can like make myself concentrate on stuff or be able to read something. Sometimes a feel good like fluffy book will help. Sometimes it helps out to read things that have characters with similar experiences that I'm dealing with. So I guess that would be like reading sad books. But then sometimes I can't read at all. Like the past 2 days, I've been really like depressed and in it. I have read absolutely nothing, but I have watched God knows how many episodes of Gordon Ramsay's 24 Hours to Hell and Back. So like, I need a show that I don't necessarily have to think about, that doesn't really have like a continuous plot. So I usually default to cooking shows if I'm in that sort of headspace. Prompt number 5 is, most often do you use reading to escape, learn, or critically reflect? The answer to this is yes. All of the above. Especially like within the past year, I've used books to escape a lot, but it's like escaping like immediate things that are going on and like immediate issues. But in general, like, kind of why I read is to be able to understand people, understand humanity in a more complex way. Of course, that isn't like, you know, every single thing that I read won't always do that, but I think overall, reading like a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of genres, I think gives you more insight to people, how they work and how they feel. So that, I guess, goes into kind of learning, but more critically reflecting. I also use it to like reflect on myself. I read a lot of nonfiction, so that's clearly a decent amount of learning, and also feeds into the whole being able to understand people better. Prompt number 6 is, what is the last book that made you laugh out loud? I feel like I don't read a ton of books that are like humor, like would be in the humor section, or like that's their primary thing, is to entertain you in that way. But I have read some books that have some pretty funny stuff in them. A while back, I read the whole Saga series, and there's a whole lot in this. I vlogged my way through through it for the most part, so you can look at that if you want specifics. But there are so many, like, witty one-liners and a bunch of other things that genuinely made me laugh out loud. Another book that I read, but has less drama and sadness than Saga does, that made me laugh out loud, but also made me, like, smile, is Road Queen, Eternal Road Trip to Love. I reread this book earlier this month, and reading this just had me smiling, like, all the way through it. They are so cute. There are so many little, like, funny things. The whole premise of the book is ridiculous. It's, like, this fake dating, rivals to lovers, very much just fluff. So if you want something that's cheesy and kind of funny, that book will definitely do it. Problem number 7 is, what is a book that has made you cry? And as I've already said, lots of books make me cry. Arguably, most books make me cry. But I have 2 in particular that I'm going to talk about. One is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And this book made me feel so many things. There's a lot going on in here in general. They talk about grief. They talk about self-acceptance. There's also, like, the romance aspect. The way that the romance is written is unlike anything that I'd ever read before, because it's so soft and subtle, and it's so perfect. Like, as someone who's been in that situation where, like, you're in love, but kind of, like, blocking that at the same time, like, this really got it. This book had a number of different things going on. It talked about grief, so that was something that, you know, was going to make me cry. But also just the, like, relationship dynamic that's in here, and Ari's feelings, like, about himself and his general, like, character. Pieces of it reflected a part of myself that I really wasn't prepared for, and I definitely sobbed reading this book. I actually had to cut out of my reading vlog where I was, like, crying about this book, trying to talk about it. So this one definitely made me cry. Another book that made me cry relatively recently was The House of Impossible Beauties. I actually had to set this book down because I was sobbing, like, ugly sobbing. And, like, with Ari and Dante, there's some stuff that is, like, really sad. Like, grief is really sad. There are a lot of other emotions. But in general, this isn't a, like, depressing or hopeless book. The House of Impossible Beauties had another level of sadness and spoke to a number of different things. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give anything away, but this was sad as shit. Like, the way that they did all of it was really beautiful, but I don't want to say too much because I don't want to get into spoilery territory. This book is fucking beautiful, but it's also really devastating. So, we can move on to question 8, which is, what is a book that you didn't know how you felt about? And for this, I have Dream Boy by Jim Grimsley. I read this a few years back, and I think that I need to reread it. There was a lot of this that was kind of confusing, not in a storyline way, but in a thematic way. There was a lot of tying, like, sex and death together. The whole ending is just bizarre. So I really don't know how I felt about this. Since I've read it, and thinking about, like, when it was written, this was published in the mid-90s, I think that there's more to pull from it, maybe in regards to, like, the AIDS epidemic and stuff like that, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about that when I read it the first time, so I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. I do want to reread it to get a better grasp on that. But yeah, I don't know whether or not I liked this book at all. Prompt number 9 is, are you more likely to read on a sunny or cloudy day? That I'm honestly not really sure about. I haven't thought that much about the weather and how much I read, so I don't know. When I was actually at a place that I could sit outside and read, I think the answer would have been like when the sun was out, but I don't really have the option to read outside at this point. Prompt number 10 is, do you usually set the mood when you read? And occasionally I'll put on music. That kind of has more to do with concentration than setting the mood, though. If I went, like, I like the idea of setting the mood and, like, having, like, an all-around, like, great experience, but I just feel like it's not realistic for me. Like, it would just take so much energy and I would get, like, distracted. It would turn into me, like, doing a bunch of side stuff that doesn't even really technically impact my reading. So that's, like, I'll get blankets, I'll put on music to help me concentrate, but I usually don't go in and intentionally set the mood because it would turn into its own project. Prompt number 11 is, can you leap from book to book or do you need buffer time between them? On the whole, I definitely jump back and forth. I am regularly in the middle of reading several books at the same time. This has more to do with, like, my, like, focus problems, though, and the fact that I can't really concentrate on reading a book unless I'm 100% into it, so the kind of, like, mood reader-y-ness. Although there are times where some books, when I stop them, like, I do need time to recuperate. Ari and Dante and The House of Impossible Beauties were both like that. Like, the night that I finished Ari and Dante, I was not picking up another book because I was having an emotional crisis. So, it really depends on the book. Usually I can go straight into another one, but if they have a really profound impact on me, I have to sit with it. Like, usually with graphic novels, I'll go from one into the other fairly quickly. But with Laura Dean, I just kind of sat in my bed for like an hour after I read it, just thinking. So that was not one that I jumped into something right after either. So that is all that I have for the Moody Reader Tag. If you have thoughts or feelings on any of the books that I've mentioned, let me know about them in the comments. And if you have any interest doing this tag, consider yourself tagged. It was a fun time, and I think that it fit pretty well with me as a reader. But thank you all so much for watching. Bye.